It's time for custom cards. This time around, famous lore characters that aren't yet in Hearthstone. And this is a great example. Gammon, probably the most iconic, noteworthy, and significant lore character in all of Warcraft. That's a bit of a meme for those who play World of Warcraft. But I was looking at this and I was thinking to myself, realistically, what stat line would be okay for a 1-attack 3-drop? Probably not 30 health, but how high could you go? There's already a 3-mana 110 with an effect. Could you print a 3-mana 115? A 3-mana 120? Talk about that in chat as we move into the real cards in this video. Like this one from Wayward Crow, Sargeras the Defender. Probably the most iconic Warcraft villain of all. And Wayward took him in a neat direction here with the Corrupt keyword that we saw in Dark Moon Fair, because of course Sargeras started out as a pretty nice Titan dude, and then of course turned into the biggest villain in all of WoW, debatably. And this card's a 9-mana 4/12 by default. It has Taunt and Poisonous, and then when you corrupt it, which is hard to do at 9 mana, it becomes Sargeras the Fallen. That's still a 9-mana 4/12. This time it has Rush and Poisonous. It's also now immune to Poisonous, and then it corrupts again into Sargeras the Destroyer, his final form. And I love this idea of like a final boss, you know, getting multiple forms. It's such a great anime or video game style thing. And then he's a 12/12 with Rush. He can't be targeted by spells or hero powers, and his battle cry destroys all minions in both decks. So if you manage to corrupt this guy multiple times, he's like this just all-in play. Completely swings the board, just puts everybody into fatigue. It says, deal with it. And I've never seen a more final boss sort of mechanic. Now, a few things, like, that's maybe too crazy good, right? At first I thought, man, corrupting 9-mana cards is really, really hard, but we do have, clowns already getting corrupted in Druids. It's not impossible by any means to corrupt 9-mana cards. It almost would have been cool if Sargeras the Fallen was 10 mana and you had to like discount it somehow to corrupt it to get this final version. I think that would have been a pretty neat mechanic to like add some extra layers there where it's like, man, I can't do this normally. I kind of have to cheese it somehow. Also, there's a little bit of a flavor miss here with a Poisonous to me. I think the idea trying to be conveyed was that this dude's so powerful he can just like destroy any other minion. It doesn't matter what his attack is because he's freaking Sargeras. But Poisonous feels like, you know, the wrong word for that in some way or another. So I kind of get where they were going, Wayward Crow here. But I wish there was some other better word, because Poisonous sounds like a, you know, a snake or a spider or something, not a giant evil Titan dude. But nonetheless, still some really cool ideas conveyed here, and I like the use of Corrupt on such an iconic character in a fitting thematic way. This is a pretty nifty card. Moving on here to Mattias Shaw from Bahab the Warrior, a rogue legendary, an 8-mana 5/5 with Stealth and Battle Cry. Fill your battlefield with secrets from any class. So an absolute monstrosity of a card here. And that's because Mattias Shaw, if you don't know, he's like the leader of SI7. We've seen a few SI7 cards. They're like the spy CIA agency of Stormwind in World of Warcraft, and him being, you know, the leader of that, having both stealth and a ton of secrets, is a really good flavor fit for Mattias Shaw. And of course, we also know Rogue has some pretty cool secret synergy stuff. And this is a little bit of a different direction than we've got for Rogues now, where it's all about setup and kind of cheap early game cards. This is the opposite, where it's his late game bomb, and it's really self-sufficient. It doesn't rely on a lot, and it fuses the worlds of stealth and secrets together really nicely. Now, is this card too powerful? I mean, potentially, right? Your average secret is about 2 mana in cost, because you got 1 mana Paladin secrets, 3 mana Mage secrets, 2 mana Hunter and Rogue secrets. So you're saying, theoretically, you're getting 5 secrets. That's 10 mana, theoretically, in value off of Mattias Shaw, and a free 5/5 body to boot. That is a lot, but I don't think it's like totally obscene. And to be frank, Rogue can already do some pretty crazy secret cheat chains, more so than just kind of this all-at-once effect. I think a lot of people would be able to push through this, but it would still be likely a very powerful play. So all in all, it's a great fit for Shaw. It's a great fit for the class. This feels like a very good, realistic legendary. All right, so this next one is going to be a discussion point. I welcome it. Let's talk about it. This is Adal, a 4-mana neutral legendary. It's a 4/4, and it reads, you can play 0-cost spells during your opponent's turn. So the one thing that has remained sacred in Hearthstone is the passing back and forth of turns. There's no interaction in Hearthstone on your opponent's turn outside of things like secrets, essentially, are kind of a way to interact. You don't get to do things like block, like in Magic or Runeterra or other games. You're just kind of sitting there waiting for your opponent to do their stuff. And Adal could theoretically introduce a direction or trend line change there by allowing you to interact. Now, clearly this brings up some immediate questions about how would this work? Could it work? It would break the game, etc., etc. I hear all of those complaints, but I don't really care. I think we've had cards in the past that have kind of broken what we understand Hearthstone to be, like hand size limitations, for instance. And although this would probably be a bigger break, I think it would be kind of nifty to be able to like backstab your opponent's stuff in the middle of their turn. And we have to assume Hearthstone servers are registering actions as they take place. They know there's a clock. So if your opponent plays a 2/2 and they're about to buff it, there's going to be some point where that buff triggers. And if you cast your backstab in between them playing that 2/2 and the buff triggering, the 2/2 is going to die. Your opponent will be unable to cast that buff. And I think that could be possible. Would it ever happen? No, probably not. But I think it'd be pretty cool. Now, is that a good fit for Adal? I don't really know. I don't see the flavor here necessarily. I just thought it was such a cool idea and a mechanic that I wanted to discuss and explore more than anything, even if it doesn't work or it's not a welcome sort of thing. I just wanted to toss this one up to you guys and see what you thought. I think it's theoretically possible and kind of cool. So moving on here to Uriel, Light of Hope. Now, I know Uriel is now in Hearthstone, but when this was submitted, because it's taken me a while to get to this video, Uriel had not been announced yet. So she was technically a major lore character who had not yet been in Hearthstone when Proteins of Love submitted this one. He envisioned Uriel as a 5-mana 3/5 paladin card, Divine Shield, and damage dealt by this minion also heals all other friendly characters. So this is basically a super lifesteal effect on Uriel, where you're not only healing your hero, but you're also healing potentially your minions on board as well. And I really like this idea of a super lifesteal, and it feels very Uriel-like, just super heroic and paladin-y, kind of priestly as well, so you could almost see this as like a dual class card potentially. Also, and the Divine Shield aspect, of course, is a great fit too. And I like that Uriel's all about this big hammer, so, you know, dealing damage and having that lifesteal connection is really relevant. And we saw most of this in the real Uriel card as well. Like, all of those things are delivered in the real Uriel card too. So I think Proteins of Love captured the same kind of feel and effect, just in a different, unique, and pretty interesting way. Moving on here to Chin Storm Stout from Faroon, a 6-mana 5/8 neutral legendary. And it reads, damage dealt to this and your hero are delayed by 1 turn. And I think this is a really cool effect here on Chin. It's essentially kind of an ice block of sorts, where your opponent is dealing this damage, but it's not registering until later. And if you don't know World of Warcraft, monks have this same sort of effect where they can like stall out damage over time, basically taking a big hit and dissipating it over time so they don't take a big chunk of damage and die all at once. They spread it out. And that's exactly what Chin here, is kind of a super monk Pandaren character in Warcraft, is achieving with this card. And I think that's an awesome feel. Now, I haven't parsed through all the different implications of like when this happens and what it means exactly, and if you have multiple Chins and if it's alive on turn for multiple turns, how does it die? There's like a handful of different questions there to answer. But, you know, there's always single target removal to solve a lot of these problems. I'm welcoming you guys to discuss all of that in the comments below, exactly how this card would function, solve that problem. But for me, I just think it captures a great monk feel and a character we really do need to see in Hearthstone. So moving on here to Magi Bronzebeard. Oh, I love his beard. It's beautiful. This one's from Erahan. It's an 8-mana 4/6 for Warrior. And the battle card reads, if your deck has no duplicates, forge a custom weapon. And Erahan included some documentation about exactly what the forge a custom weapon would be like. In my mind, it's basically exactly like Deathstalker Rexar forging a custom minion, where you get a sort of base weapon with stats and cost, and then you get some kind of effect to double into that, and double, of course, all the stats as well, to give yourself some kind of crazy, monstrous, gigantic weapon that has a really positive effect as well. Think about, like, a self-sharpening sword that gets bigger on, like, a Gorehowl, right? And then you've got, like, an 8/5 weapon that's gaining attack every time, sort of thing, right? Maybe those two don't combine, but you get the idea. And I think Arahan intended that the card would have to be played from hand, like you'd have to spend mana on it. I actually don't even know if that's necessary. I think maybe you could just equip the weapon. This already has a condition with no duplicates, and it's only a 4/6 for 8 mana. That's not exactly, blowing anybody's minds with stats. So you could almost consider the minion kind of free and the weapon being the thing. If you compare it, for instance, to Brand Bronzebeard, you're getting that 9 mana King Crush, and the 2/4 Magni's kind of like the 2/4. Maybe you just get the weapon right away because it's not something you're always going to control, or it's always going to be amazing results. So I think you could just say forging a weapon indicates both making it and equipping it, and you just go to town here with Magni, giving warriors a pretty cool no duplicate centerpiece sort of card with some great weapon synergies. Dwarves are all about forging these awesome weapons in Ironforge, and Magi Bronzebeard fits right in there. I think this one is a pretty nifty idea. So next up here from Kevarinia, it's Illyria Void Apprentice, a 4-mana 4/4 battlecry. Cast Shadow form. If already in Shadow form, discover a Shadow word. So for instance, Shadow word Pain or Shadow word Death. Now, I mean, first things first, Shadow form got moved to the Hall of Fame. No longer in standard format. So it'd be kind of weird to print this card today without having Shadow form in standard format. But number one, who cares? Let's pretend it is still in standard format. And beyond that, let's pretend that Shadow form as a mechanic gets a few support cards where there are maybe not only Shadow forms, but multiple things that play off of Shadow form exactly like Illyria does here. And I think you have yourself a pretty cool card where you have basically a secondary class for priest, where instead of being a holy priest or a disc priest, you are a shadow priest, and your deck and your cards are built around that core mechanic of shifting your hero power. Maybe there's, for instance, even a like start of game effect that pushes you into shadow form immediately, and then you have cards here like Illyria that allow you to discover some follow-up shadow synergy stuff. I would love to see that in priest. Now, I don't know if Illyria fits perfectly in priest because she's definitely a hunter of sorts with a bow, but she does also dabble in the shadow arts, so I'm willing to let that slide. It works good enough for me, and I would love to see shadow form in priest, which is really why I wanted to spotlight this card. So next up here is Queen Ashara, really one of the more popular, or I guess famous, important villains in Warcraft that we haven't seen yet in Hearthstone. We've seen Lady Vashj, who looks very similar, but for Queen Ashara, not quite yet. This card from Magic Milk is a 7-mana 5/6 dual class for Shaman and Mage, and it reads, after you cast a spell, summon a 3/3 Naga to attack a random enemy minion. So you have a nice little spell synergy blow-up sort of card here, which works great for both Shaman and Mage. They have a ton of cheap spells. They already play this way a lot of the time. And this is both a board builder and a bit of a board swing card. You could almost consider it like a sociologist militia in a way, summoning all these 3/3s. Maybe even something like a troublemaker in Warrior, giving these 3/3s that react to the board, but with potential crazy upside where you could just keep summoning more and more. If you had enough cheap spells, could go off with some Sorcerer's Apprentices. You could just wipe your opponent's entire board with 10 3/3s, potentially. Or maybe just a couple's enough, and maybe you don't even care if they attack any enemy minions. You might happily do this on an empty board just to build a board and some threats. So all around, a great character that we need to see in Hearthstone, a pretty cool mechanic that works in both of these classes really nicely. I like this card a lot. Moving on here to the Faithful of Argus. I noticed I got a little bit of a legendary crown dragon thing on there. That's not supposed to be there. This is an epic card. It's a 3-mana 4/3 for Mas Nernodig, and it reads, start of game, if your deck contains only duplicates, combine these into Argus. And I love this twist. Instead of a no duplicate deck, this is basically a no legendary deck, or even further, a no singleton deck. You have to have only duplicates, so 15 duplicate cards in your deck, and then both of your Faithful of Arguses will combine into Argus the Unmaker, which is a 6-mana 8/6 battlecry. Cards that didn't start in your deck cost 0 this game, and shuffle a copy of your hand into your deck. So basically you give yourself, theoretically much weaker deck in Warlock, which can be tough to do. Maybe you're playing something like a Zoo deck, and then you've got this big follow-up card here with Argus the Unmaker. We get this upside where anything you create is going to cost 0 for the entire game, which is clearly pretty crazy powerful. You can make some big crazy threats, play them for 0, cheap removal, etc. Any kind of discover effect is going to go nuts. And then also shuffling a copy of your hand into your deck. If you're playing a little bit slower, you're going to get a bunch of 0-mana cards shuffled into your deck. Warlock-like Shrine cards, boom, boom, boom. You got yourself this just crazy build around, but you still have to draw Argus the Unmaker. There will be a handful of games where you miss out on Argus and you got yourself a weaker deck, but then occasionally you're going to blow things up as well. Now, I don't want to talk about power implications here and variance implications. Yes, 0-mana cards are scary. Yes, power spike cards like this are scary. I don't know if I'd necessarily welcome this exact iteration of the card into Hearthstone today. It might feel bad to play against, but I just love the design space that this one's exploring, turning duplicates into your only single card, forcing this opposite deck restriction. All of that's really, really cool. So as far as I'm concerned, this card is still a home run, even if it's not something I necessarily want to see. It could take a tweak here or there, expound on this idea, and make it absolutely amazing. All right, so that wraps it up here for the custom cards of famous lore characters this time around. Thanks, as always, for submitting these awesome designs, folks. Much appreciated. And, of course, share your thoughts on these cards down there in the comments below as well. Would a 115 be balanced and a viable Hearthstone card? Or would it have to be a 120? Maybe a 112 is as high as it could go. Very curious. And of course, share your thoughts on these other cards as well. What weapon would you make from Magi Bronzebeard, etc.? How would you break the game with any of these? I'll be looking forward to those thoughts in the comments below. Of course, if you want to submit your design for next time around, check the description. I don't know what the theme is yet. I haven't thought of it, so check the description. There will be some details down there. I'm always looking for more awesome cards like these. And of course, you could be spotlighted in a video just like this. So thanks much for watching. And until next time, game on.